Thanks for watching our third SolidWorks training video. Today I want to talk to you about subassemblies. So if you're coming off of the second video, you should recognize what we're looking at here. This is the collection of parts to build the assembly from the last video. And while you were building it, you may have noticed the repetition of doing the same tasks over and over again. Taking this pattern mount and mounting it to the inside of this channel, taking each one of the 4 screws to the pattern mount, doing all that here, doing that on this end, doing that for the other pattern mount. It is oftentimes after I've done something 4, 5, maybe even 6 times that I recognize a subassembly may save me some time here. And there are other benefits. So even if I have proceeded with all the steps in building something, sometimes I still believe there's a lot of benefit to going back and rebuilding the assembly using subassemblies. A subassembly is simply an assembly that I've used to build a bigger assembly. So what if I took this channel, the 2 pattern mounts, and the 8 screws to put that pattern mount into either end of the channel and built an assembly of that first? What I'd have would look like this. Now I can use this in a bigger assembly. Having built this, I eagerly start to build my new assembly. File, New Assembly. Grab a couple of the 16.5-inch channels. And now I notice I do not have that other assembly in here. Where is it? I've forgotten an important step. SolidWorks will not let me bring in an assembly into another assembly until it's first saved. So I go back and I save this. And I've called it Channel Plus 2 Pattern Mount. Now I can come over here, insert components, and there is my subassembly. And I drop 2 of them in place. Now, in case you weren't counting, I have taken care of half my screws, or 16 of them. However, I still need to mount these faces to my channel and then add the 4 screws to mount this to the channel. And I'm going to have to do that with each face. So I've still got 16 screws that I'm going to need to mount. So can I do anything to help take care of that? Yes, I can. I go back into my subassembly, and again, I'm looking at, okay, I'm going to add 4 screws here and then 4 screws on the other side. I can actually save myself even more. What if I had a pattern mount set up with all 8 screws that it required already added? So let's go build that. So I'm going to go make a new assembly. I'm going to go get my pattern mount. I'm going to rotate it up just so it's in the orientation that I've been used to seeing it in. And I'm going to go grab the machine screws that I know I need. All of them. And I will use copy and paste to help make my life easier. Now I am going to make the concentric mates that will mate these holes, these screws to the tapped holes. I will not make another mate, and you'll see why in a few minutes. So you will notice for each screw, I mated it using concentric mate to the hole where the screw was going to go, but I did not make the mate to bring it flush. The reason is there's going to be a channel wall in between there. And the same is true here. There's going to be a channel wall there as well. While I could set up some kind of a mate to give myself the perfect distance, I'm not going to. I'm going to wait and actually do that mate on the channel itself, and you'll see in a few minutes. Now, like I said before, we need to make sure we save a subassembly before, or save an assembly before it can be used as a subassembly. So we're going to come out here and call this pattern mount C plus 8 screws. Now I'm going to go back to my channel that has the pattern mounts in, and I'm going to modify this assembly. So I'm going to take this, the other side tapped on the other end, and all the screws, and I'm just going to delete all of them. Notice, because I do have some mates set up, when I go to delete a part that has mates, I get additional confirmation from SolidWorks saying, do you want to delete that? You'll also have to delete these dependent items, and it's talking about the mates that are out here. And I'm just going to say yes to all, and that will stop the prompts from coming. Now I go into Insert Components. I've got this side tapped pattern mount. I'm going to add one on the far side and then flip it over and add one on the near side. Now I will mate the insides like we've always done. And I will slide this down closer to its final position. Now, instead of mounting or mating the screw holes to my channel holes, I can actually just mount the screws themselves. So I take this screw and I mount it to this hole. That lines up the channel, or I'm sorry, that lines up the pattern mount in the channel as well, because of the mate between the screw and the pattern mount. So I'll do that one, and then I will do this second one. And once again, you can see once I click on it, I get a little bit of transparency on the whole assembly, and now I can see the inside of this hole on my channel, and I can select that. Now I'll go over and do the same thing over here. And now I want those screws to be flush against my channel. And if I grab it, I'm getting this selected component is fully defined. It cannot be moved. Well, why is that? If I come back over to my subassembly, I can move these screws just fine. And if I move them out like that and then save it, and then come back to my assembly, well, they're moved out, but I cannot move them in the assembly. I cannot move the parts of the subassembly. That is not set in stone. That is easily changed. If you'll notice over here, we've seen this before, this icon represents a part. This icon represents a subassembly. Well, because that blue block is firmly attached to the yellow block on the icon, that is telling me that this is fixed, and I want to make the subassembly flexible. Again, what I did was I right-clicked, and now you can see there's an icon here that shows the same kind of thing, but that blue block is a little bit detached from the yellow block. Now my subassembly is, oh, I did the wrong one. I have two of them, of course. Now my subassembly is flexible, and now these screws move just as well in the main assembly as they did in the original assembly where they were built. Now I can take my final step with these 8 screws around the sides of my channel, and I can mount the shoulder of the screw to the face of my channel. And I would strongly suggest you use your multi-mate for this. I've got 4 screws that need to go to that channel face right there. Now notice when I'm getting ready to do a new multi-mate, by default SolidWorks makes this box active. And I wish when I was in Multimate doing Multimates, they would just make that box active. The difference is this is my common mate entity, and this is my multi-mates. Obviously, I'm going to want to select that first. So I do have to remember to come over here and select that first. Otherwise, the first item I click on will end up down in the multi-mate reference area. Now I have the channel and the pattern mount and all 16 screws needed for this. I'm going to save that, save the changes. And then when I go back into my assembly that I'm building, you will see these changes. Those screws are now in place. Now I have 3 different types of mates to finish up my assembly. The first is the faces of my pattern mount need to be mounted to the inside faces of my side channels. Next, I need to mate some of these screws to the appropriate holes on the channels, just the concentric part of it to make sure things line up properly. Then lastly, I need to line up the shoulders of all my screws with the insides of my channel. At that point, I need to make sure that my subassemblies are flexible, not rigid. You might have done that before now, but it was not necessary before this step. And now I am done. I have finished this channel. I have used, the chassis with the channel, the pattern mounts, and all the screws necessary for the build. I mentioned earlier in the video that one of the advantages to using subassemblies is it makes modifications easier. Along that line, I want to show you if we want to move this entire channel back. Right now we've got it lined up, remember, with our 5th hole from the edge. What if we wanted it at the 6th hole? We wanted to move it at this point. What we can do is first go down into our mates and find the mates. Remember, the only thing that is keeping this channel from sliding up and down or moving around inside here are the concentric mates of the screws to these side channels. So if I highlight or hover over my different concentric mates, I can see this one is on that back channel, back cross channel. This one, number 3, number 4, those are on my front channel, as are number 5 and 6 on the far side. So I can delete these 4 concentric mates and now this channel is free to move around. I can line it up with my 6th hole instead of my 5th. I can make the mates again in this new position, and then it will be locked in place. I'll go ahead and do that now. And now that channel on this end has been moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the 6th position, and it cannot be moved. It is fully defined. Again, notice all of the screws moved with it. And what I'd like you to do is see how difficult that same move might be with the original chassis that you build that had all of the screws and their mates defined separately, because you probably will move the channel, then have to move each one of the individual screws that are connecting from the inside. You'll probably have to move each one of those individually. It's a much more intensive modification than what we just did here. Thanks, guys.